The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus told his disciples a parable. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? No disciple is superior to the teacher, but when fully trained, every disciple will be like his teacher. Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own? How can you say to your brother, "Brother, let me remove that splinter in your eye," when you do not even notice the wooden beam in your own eye? You hypocrite, remove the wooden beam from your eye first. Then you will see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother's eye. A good tree does not bear rotten fruit, nor does a rotten tree bear good fruit. For every tree is known by its fruit. For people do not pick figs from thornbushes, nor do they gather grapes from brambles. A good person, out of the store of goodness in his heart, produces good. But an evil person, out of the store of evil, produces evil. For from the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. The Gospel of the Lord. Lent is about as late as it comes for Jubilee year 2025. And these Sundays before Lent, are meant to prepare the way, as it were, as John the Baptist did, for people to make room, to make more space for God in their lives, in our lives, and to do so for us as Christians by a spiritually productive penitential season of Lent. And so the Sundays before Lent are, you might say, a countdown. 70 Sundays before, 60 Sundays today, 50 Sundays, Quinquagesima Sunday, 50 Sundays before Easter, and in between, we have this 40-day period of reflection for Lent, in which, and through which, and by which, we're invited and called and challenged to acknowledge that we all sin in different ways, and that we should make extra efforts to change, to reflect upon that, and to try to change to the best of our abilities, to put some time and extra work into that process. Over the past few weeks, I've been thinking a lot and remembering Pope Francis and his illness. And as I was thinking about him, he's 10 years younger than Father Zach, so a whole decade younger. But Father Zach, as you saw a few weeks ago, is in great shape. So we certainly pray for Pope Francis as a church. And in 2013, when he was elected Pope, Jorge Mario Bergoglio from Argentina, he was elected, and shortly after that, he had an interview with America magazine. And the interviewer, a priest, asked him, "Who are you? Who are you?" And his response is really a beautiful invitation for us to think about Lent. He said, "I'm a sinner." And he wanted to say, that's the most accurate definition of who I am. So Francis' statement wasn't false humility or public sentiment of self-piety. It's a personal recognition of human imperfection. Even he, as the Pope, acknowledges what we do every time we begin the Mass in the penitential rite, but especially on Ash Wednesday. And presumably the Pope will receive ashes this Wednesday, hopefully. Last year, there's a person who works here who monitors the security cameras for the church. And she took her time on her own to count how many folks came here for ashes, and it was just under 3,000 people. Ash Wednesday is a fascinating day. Personally, I love Ash Wednesday. A lot of priests, don't necessarily love Ash Wednesday because it's a busy day, but it's an opportunity to encounter people on the journey of life. And in fact, more people come to church on Ash Wednesday than on Christmas or Easter or here or everywhere. It's not even a holy day of obligation. Receiving ashes, though, should say publicly something that we don't often like to admit. Two things. Number one, I'm a sinner. And number two, I want to do something to try to change that, to be better. Interesting, in Europe, ashes are distributed in a different way. The person comes to the person administering ashes and bows his or her head, and the ashes are sprinkled on the top of the person's head. So it's a different sign here because unless you're bald, you're not going to know that the person has ashes. So it's very different here, and actually it complies more with the gospel for Ash Wednesday, which says don't do anything public. Let your prayer and your fasting and your giving to others be hidden. But this is the way we do it here, and I think personally it's a very good sign, but people can sometimes miss the point that I'm a sinner and I'm going to do something about it. I'm not talking about somebody else's sin, but we ourselves. So today's gospel narrative, taken from Jesus' Sermon on the Plain, has something to say about the human tendency to focus, though, not on ourselves, but on the failings, the sins, the issues, the problems of other people. In the Sermon on the Plain that we've been hearing over the past couple of weeks, Jesus speaks very plainly on the plain and directly with difficult sayings. If you remember, woe to you when everyone speaks well of you. Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. And then today, he asks this rather uncomfortable but graphic question. How can you say to another person, let me remove the splinter from your eye, when you don't even notice the wooden beam in your own? And it goes on to say two words, you hypocrite. Remove the wooden beam from your own eye first, then you will see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother's eye. So Jesus shares similar sentiments in other parts of the gospel as well. In the Sermon on the Mount from St. Matthew, do not judge, and you will not be judged, he warns. So this gospel passage connects with Ash Wednesday, in which Jesus directs his disciples towards two things: honest self-evaluation and honest desire, intention for self-improvement. Plainly put, we Christians must take stock of our own faults before harping on what we consider the sins, the problems, the issues of our neighbors, to look inward first. The wooden beam lodged in the eye is a striking, almost humorous image where this wooden beam is sticking out of the person's eye, and yet he or she doesn't notice it. And so this ties to Jesus' earlier question in the same passage: can a blind person guide a blind person? When you think about social media and the other forms of modern technology, social media has sort of streamlined our collective, universal ability to discover and to denounce the alleged wrongdoings of others, of strangers. And these powerful tools, though, have done very little to encourage self-reflection, self-evaluation, first and foremost for ourselves. We can look outwards as though through a one-way virtual mirror, without permitting the light to shine back, the light to shine on us in return. So our computer screens are contradictions, because in one sense, they both reflect and they obscure, both together. So Jesus challenges us to start with ourselves before throwing stones. And that's why ashes are received, so that we should, in a sense, look into the mirror and say, that's me, that's a sinner. But number two, I'm going to try to do something about that during these 40 days of Lent, to be ready to renew the vows of our own baptism on Easter, and to move forward in the light of Christ by self-reflection. So obviously his teachers don't prohibit us and shouldn't prohibit us from naming injustice and immorality when we see it. But Jesus challenges attempts to make others better without a similar and prior application of judgments about ourselves. I ran across a story in yesterday's Newsday entitled, Putting Down the Phone Makes Us Happier. Putting down the phone makes us happier. And it's a study that says that blocking and not using the internet and social media sites for a few weeks, we have 40 days, for a few weeks, left 91% of people feeling better about themselves. So, Sunday morning is usually a time when if you look on your phone, it'll give you the screen time for the following week. And maybe it would be a good thing in terms of giving something up, to give up, putting acknowledging the splinter in someone else's eye and looking at ourselves. Pope Francis has often advised that we should put down the phone or turn off the computer and reach out to the Bible, reach out to the scriptures to help us to be more self-directed through the grace of the Holy Spirit. And so as of today, we have 50 days before Easter for this time of personal introspection. And I suppose in summary, I think we can sum up this pre-Lent and pre-Ash Wednesday homily by saying, let us begin with ourselves, myself, yourself, before pressing the send button, Word or through the computer, before pressing the send message to others.